Well, it's 5 o'clock, so I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Saugeen Shores Committee of Adjustment. It's Monday, March the 17th, and it is 5 o'clock, as I said. Just before we get started, since it's the first time that the committee has met here, just want you to know that there are washrooms just straight out the door to the left. It is one that you have to push on the button there to get into. Eventually, there are washrooms down in the Plex too, but that's the closest one right now. And you do have to push the button generally a couple of times to open the door. At least I did the other day. For committee members and for any member of the public who wishes to speak, there should be a microphone in front of you, or you're going to come up to the podium. Important that you turn the microphone on when you're going to speak. That enables people who are listening in or attending virtually to hear clearly. Also, though, when you finish speaking, important to turn off your microphone, which then enables all the other microphones to work properly. It's about the fourth or fifth meeting in here, so there might still be a few kinks, but hopefully everything will go smoothly. And I'll just leave that, has some housekeeping kind of details, and welcome everybody to this meeting. Nice to see some members of the public here. So our first order of business is the land acknowledgement, and member Herb Schmidt will read that today.
Thank you. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for their contributions that they have made in both caring for the land and in shaping this community. We commit to truth and reconciliation, to acknowledging the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people, and we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward in a path to healing along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation.
Thank you, Herb. And for the benefit of the public that are here, before you leave, please look on the wall back on that side. There is a copy of the Friendship Accord that Council recently signed and shook hands with our friends at SON about. And also the artwork that's there is a gift that they gave us. We have also commissioned the exact same piece, which we've given back to them too, so that the same artwork will hang in both our chambers and in their band council office. Okay, our next order of business is a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the nature thereof. Any member can declare at this point if they have a pecuniary interest. You can do it now or at any point during the meeting. Seeing none, I don't believe we have any addition, deletions, or amendments to the minutes. So item 5 on the agenda is the adoption of minutes from the February the 18th meeting, and I have a recommendation that the Committee of Adjustment approve the minutes of February the 18th, 2025 as presented. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, seconded by Herb Schmidt. Is there any concerns about the minutes? Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a public hearing for file number A-2024-032. This is a public hearing under the Planning Act. If anyone from the public is interested in this application or wishes to receive a notice of the decision, please send an email to bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca. And first, we will receive a report from the County Planner, Julie Steeper. Then we will hear from the members of the public who are here in person, virtually, or who have submitted correspondence to the county via email. Then the committee members will have an opportunity to ask clarifying questions, and I will ask them to reserve any comments that they have on the application until the public hearing has closed. Members of the public are advised that the right to appeal the decision on this application is limited to specified persons and public bodies as defined in the Planning Act, or the owner or applicant of the land subject to the amendment who have provided oral or written comments to the committee on the application before the decision is made. I now declare the public hearing open and ask the planner on the file to present the application, and I'll invite Planner Julie Steeper to make her report, and she's on the screen for those of you at the back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The purpose of the application this evening is to permit an enlargement of a legal non-conforming residential use. The proposed front yard setback is 5 meters, whereas the required in the zoning bylaw is 6. The proposed rear yard setback is 3 meters, whereas the required in the zoning bylaw is 7.5 meters. The proposed site coverage is 47%, whereas the required in the zoning bylaw is 45%. If approved, the application would facilitate the replacement of the existing single detached dwelling at 243 Lake Street. The property is located within the town of Southampton. It's west of Lake Street and east of Macaulay Street, and is east of Lake Huron as well. The property is surrounded by residential uses. The planning analysis centers around the 2 tests set out in section 45(2) of the Planning Act with respect to the expansion of legal non-conforming uses. Those tests are that the application is desirable for the appropriate development of this subject property, and that the application is not anticipated to result in any undue adverse impacts on the surrounding properties and neighborhood. The subject site is located within the primary urban communities designation of the Bruce County official plan, and within the residential designation of the town of Saugeen Shores official plan. The proposed residential use and building are permitted in those designations. The owners are proposing to rebuild the existing dwelling in the same general footprint as and the residence is proposed to increase the front yard setback and side yard setback to more align with the requirements in the zoning bylaw. The floor area is being modestly increased. The proposal's footprint overall is proposed to align more with the zoning bylaw than the existing building. The increase to the footprint is considered minimal and compatible with the low density character of the area. Public comments were received relating to concerns the proposal will create drainage issues. A lot grading and drainage plan is proposed as a condition on the decision. The applicant will be required to submit a lot grading and drainage plan to the satisfaction of the town of Saugeen Shores as part of a building permit application. Of course, any and all water runoff is required to be dealt with within the originating property boundaries. Public comments were received from the surrounding neighbors regarding concerns relating to character of the area, excess of footprint, potential to create drainage issues, and lack of parking for guests. And the possible potential of the development will reduce the tree canopy. In terms of any impacts the proposed development is expected to have on the surrounding neighborhood, it is not anticipated that permitting the increase in lot coverage will have any impact to the character of the area or the impact of ability of adjacent property owners to use their property for permitted uses. The town of Saugeen Shores staff have noted potential encroachment issues with pavers and the fence towards the front of the subject property extending onto the municipally owned road allowance. The applicant has confirmed that these will be removed. A condition has been drafted to ensure that the encroachment is removed. The applicant will be required to submit a lot grading and drainage plan, and parking will not be impacted by the proposed rebuild. Parking will be provided on the driveway. Existing trees and vegetation are proposed to be maintained to the greatest extent possible. Further concerns regarding the potential of construction creating structural risks for neighboring properties and providing a disruption to the neighborhood by creating noise and dust and the potential loss of property values. These comments were considered but not but are beyond the scope of the planning application. Based on the above, staff conclude that the subject application satisfies the two tests set out in 45(2) of the Planning Act with respect to the expansion. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Steeper. I would now invite, we will now hear from members of the public. And again, I have two people on the list here. I don't know if anybody's online who wishes to speak. Did you? No, it's the members of the public first. I was asking who's online. Okay. So we'll now hear from members of the public. Please note that again, it's the first time we've had a committee of adjustment meeting here too, so we'll figure that out as well. Please note that the host will mute and unmute you as directed by the chair in accordance with rules of order for the meeting. Please remain muted at all times unless specifically directed to do so by the chair. Is the applicant or agent present? So there. Okay, do you wish to make a submission?
No, we're good.
Okay. Can you just, for the record, please state your full name, just so that we know who was in attendance at the meeting?
Sure. Steve Dennison, it's with Dennison Homes, Bruce County Custom Cabinets.
Thank you very much. So is there anyone else from the public here with questions, concerns, or comments or objections to the application? I believe there is. So I have at least two people on the list here. Is there anyone else online? Okay, so I'll invite Claudia Wonder to the microphone. Please state your full name for the record before making your comments. And again, just turn the mic on.
Madam Chair and members of the Saugeen Shores.
Just a moment, Claudia.
Oh, okay, right to the mic, got it.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
very much. Madam Chair and members of the Saugeen Shores Committee of Adjustment and members of the audience. I'm going to begin just by reading a paragraph that was shared with me by a neighbor who cannot be present because it summarizes in many ways our objections to this proposal. In the case of the property in question, by the way, this comes from a neighbor named David Inch. In case of the property in question, it is currently non-conforming. It is proposed to be even more non-conforming, both in rear setbacks and lot coverage, and it's proposed to double its volume. Cottage areas are traditionally very low density areas. In fact, the area involved is considered special to some extent because of its inclusion in the Cottage Street studies, which I've been actively involved in and which I continually thank Cheryl Grace for spearheading. With so much effort by the town in ensuring that road rebuilds do not drastically change the personality of the neighborhood, it would be unacceptable to then have buildings do just that. And now speaking for myself, and I do hope that the members of the committee have read our feedback. You've read or heard feedback about character, and you have evidence that the neighbors care. That's why the Cottage Streets guidelines were approved. While you have no direct test of character that you can apply to this application, you do have an indirect test. It's the test of size. And size has a direct impact on character. The extent to which this already non-conforming residence on an undersized lot is made more non-conforming is in your hands. Please help the neighbors preserve character by limiting footprint size, especially on undersized lots. I ask that you please deny the variance requested on the setback at the rear of this property. The requested setback is 3 meters. The required setback is 7.5 meters. That's a big difference. Right now, the footprint is 4.47 meters. Please hold this proposal to that 4.47 meters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have another person on the list, Mr. Bowden, Bill Bowden. Again, if you can state your name for the record and speak directly into the microphone.
Members of council, my name is William Bowden, and I live at 243 Palmerston Street. Not being an immediate neighbor, perhaps I can say things that the neighbors can't. I do not know the applicants, but understand that the cottage at 243 Lake Street was recently purchased. The application proposes to replace a cottage with a 5-bedroom house. This suggests that either the applicants have a large family or they intend to use the house for short-term rentals, which are, as you know, unregulated. Either use will require significant space for parking. The file contains a complaint that, without consulting their neighbors, last fall the new owners built a fence that encroaches on their properties. Is this simply a mistake, or does it suggest a cavalier attitude towards property lines and setbacks? The drawings of the proposed house show a building with black siding and white or light gray trim. Members of council will no doubt be aware that almost every house built in Saugeen Shores during the past 10 years has either black siding with white trim or white siding with black trim. The exceptions usually have stone or brick facade. While there is no planning control for all this ticky-tackyum, it is clear that these facades are not consistent with the character of the historic cottage area. In summary, we need to ask ourselves, will we know when we have lost the historic character of Southampton? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thanks for turning the mic off.
I don't know if I can.
So there's no one online? Okay. Are there any written submissions that were not already discussed in the planning report presentation or oral submissions?
Chair Huber, there were 2 additional comments received by the county that were forwarded onto the committee by email on Friday, March 14th.
Okay, so we don't have to read those. Okay. Do any committee members then have clarifying questions for the planner or the applicant or members of the public based on what they said before we close the public hearing? And again, this is for questions. Councillor Grace and then Herb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, let me get this a little closer here. Okay. For Julie, there's some questions, and thank you for replying to the questions that I sent earlier today. But I think for the public, there might be these answers may be of interest to them. My first question related to the relationship between the back fence of the rear lot and the neighbors at 242 Macaulay. Just something that maybe for people looking at the report from the air photo, it looks as though the cottage at 242 Macaulay was built within the lot lines of 243 Lake. Could you clarify that, please, Julie?
Yeah, so in reviewing the air photo, it's an approximation when you get the air photo outlay with the outlines of the property boundaries. What I utilize and which the applicant has submitted is a survey showing the existing property boundaries and in relation to existing buildings. And so the neighboring property is not located across property boundaries, and the existing building on site is wholly within the property.
Okay, thank you. So yes, and in that question, I also followed up with a question about the registered plan on Plan 3 of the staff report. From what I could tell, looking at that, it looked as though the cottage at 242 Macaulay was built very close to the lot line of the subject property at 243 Lake. And probably also a legal non-conforming issue from historically, I'm assuming. I asked about the square footage of the existing cottage and the proposed square footage of, or the proposed square footage of the expansion. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I actually provided the existing square footage of the house as 81 square meters in size. This is an approximation based off the survey they provided. I can do some calculations based off of the size of the lot and their setbacks. And then the proposed dwelling is proposed to be 93 square meters. This is, of course, isn't including the porches in either of the drawings, just to provide some background there.
Okay, thank you. So I translated that to square feet because it's more meaningful to me. Just to clarify, that would be about 876 square feet for the existing cottage and 1,008 square feet for the proposed. I guess my question is, the diagrams that we saw showed what looked like a full second floor. So I'm wondering, not being a builder or developer, I don't know, but my question is, I'm not sure how that would be possible with the 1,008 square feet for the total new rebuild. That's a question in my mind, I guess. I don't know if you can answer that, Julie.
If I can clarify, I was speaking about the footprint in general. I wasn't talking about the second story, but I was just providing the difference in square meters and area from either dwellings, and perhaps the applicant, Steve, is better suited to address the question of square footage and the square footage with the additional level and the ground floor.
If Mr. Dennison would like to answer that question.
Yeah, that's no problem. So the main floor, yeah, is a little over 1,000 square feet. And yeah, we'd be looking to do a second story as well. So from a square footage calculation, that second story would be the same square footage as the main minus the stairs from a technical standpoint. So it would be a little under 2,000 square feet of living space.
Okay,
Like 1,900 somewhere in there. So
thank you. And I know a couple of people asked about, will there be a basement crawl space built on slab?
If I may, I can provide a response to that. The applicant is not moving forward with the basement at this time. They are proposing a crawl space or slab on grade, but they have not decided.
Okay. I don't want to hog the questions. Mr. Inch's letter raised the following question. Is it true that it is not permitted to change volume in a rebuild where the original footprint is non-conforming unless the building footprint is brought into conformance? Is that true, Julie?
If I may, that is incorrect. A building can be completely rebuilt to existing setbacks and footprint without a planning act application. If they were to expand in any way, that means in coverage or height, minor variance of 45.2 would be required, or it may be additional planning act applications, depending on the scenario.
Okay. And my question is about height. Another question, Madam Chair. The enlargement granted permits a maximum height of 8 meters because of the area that it's in. Because it's west of, I believe, Grosvenor Street or Huron Grosvenor Street, I believe. The restriction in an R1 is 8 meters, not the usual 10 meters. Could a lower height, for instance, the proposed height of 7.5 meters be added as a condition to the, to any approval?
The committee could choose to add a condition in respect to the provisions of height. However, it would be something that staff would not recommend or does not recommend facilitating a condition, and just cautions the ability as the condition would have to meet the performance of the standards in regards to the legal non-conforming tests that were outlined in the report.
So if I can follow up on that. So basically you're talking about the reference to the test of an undue adverse impact upon the surrounding neighborhood or adjacent properties?
I should clarify, there should just be planning reasons as to why the restrictions are required over the zoning bylaw.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just before I let Member Schmidt ask. So Julie, is it possible though, you just commented that it, I don't understand. Is it possible to have the committee recommend a very specific inclusion of 7.5 meters? Is it possible?
Yes, the committee could choose to add a condition.
Thank you. Member Schmidt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. More of a question of process. I think you've answered this, Julie. The reason this is coming to the Committee of Adjustment, it's already legal non-conforming, is because we're going beyond what is existing there. Is that correct? So I guess what I'm saying is if they were to build according even to the height and the setbacks and the lot coverage, it would not come to us?
If I may, the reason you're seeing the application today is because the applicant is proposing to expand the footprint of the building. If the because the building is being increased in footprint, that's why you're seeing this application. It's being expanded. If they were to build to the exact same as what they have, but just facilitate a rebuild, that wouldn't necessarily be an application or require an application.
And is there now? I think one of the areas of contention, it was the setbacks. The setback in the rear is actually a fair bit closer, I guess, to the property that's behind them. Is that's also, I guess, a reason for this, aside from the footprint?
Yes, if I may. So what we're seeing is that the minimum rear yard setback, well, the existing is 4.47 meters, and they're proposing 3.04 meters, which is an enlargement, and that is a reason why we're seeing the application. And there's an increase to the maximum lot coverage, which is an enlargement, and also the height is an enlargement as well. They're going from 1 story to 2 stories.
Okay, thank you. The setback, one more question if I may. The setback, does that come to the front porch, to the end of the property, or does that come to the edge of the house?
The front setback is basically from the front property line to the wall of the structure. The porch is not included in that setback, the 5.1. Okay,
and is the porch included in the lot coverage, or is that strictly just the house itself?
The porch is included in the lot coverage. It's a covered porch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members who, Member Martin?
Oops, sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If I could ask Planner Steeper through you, just a couple of questions. We've heard members of the community passionately speak about the preservation of the existing character. I'm going to ask you a question about how it appears now. I know something about that neighborhood. Would you agree with me that there are several two-story buildings on Lake Street in the vicinity of this?
If I may, there are a mix of two-story and single-story dwellings. Yes.
And to your knowledge, there's been a substantial amount of renovation of existing cottages on non-conforming lots in that neighborhood.
I can't necessarily speak to the IFC Planning Act applications, but yes, I believe there has been, renovations or development in that area.
Thank you very much. And I just have one question. You probably won't be able to answer it, but I just wanted to try. Do you know what the setback is in 242 Macaulay between the lot line of the applicant's property and 242 Macaulay, between its building? When I was by there the other day, I didn't want to trespass, obviously, but it seemed that their building was very, very close.
If I just may ask a question of clarity, are we speaking about the property that directly backs onto the rear of this applicant's property?
Yes, 242. I think backs directly on.
If I may direct committee to the survey in my report, there is what appears to be a dimension between that neighboring building and the property line in which they share, and it looks like it's 0.67 meters.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt.
Working now. Somebody flip a switch? Was it just me? Thanks for your report, Julie. And can you talk to me a little bit about the lot drainage? One of the letters from a neighboring resident indicated that all of the rainfall water from the roof will, drains to the lake across their property. Can you talk about that? Will there be a lot drainage plan done, and will the drainage impact the neighboring resident?
If I may, through you, Chair. There is a condition proposed with this application, and that is a lot grading and drainage plan is completed to the satisfaction of the town of Saugeen Shores before applying for a building permit application. Any water runoff should be dealt with within the originating property boundaries.
Okay. Page 15 of 97 in my pages anyways, it is whether the proposed extension or enlargements is compatible with the character of the surrounding area. And next section in blue, the characteristics of the existing use in relation to size, height, setbacks, etc. The next paragraph says the external residential use does not contribute to any of the issues listed above. In other words, will not impact the compatibility with the character of the surrounding area. Why do you make that statement? Can you just clarify why you say such statement?
Regarding if you review my report there, I am evaluating a number of characteristics that can contribute to a use or an existing use creating nuisances or issues that would not be appropriate for an area. Some of those things are bulk, height, setbacks, noise, vibration, fumes, dust, smoke, odors, lighting, traffic generation. In review of these items and the fact that the property is residential and surrounded by residential uses, my opinion is that this would not necessarily facilitate any undue adverse impacts.
Does the 8 meter meet the zoning restrictions in our bylaw? Does it meet our regulation?
If I may, through you, Chair, it does. The zoning bylaw in this area, there's a special provision that is reduced than what a typical R1 area would allow. A normal R1 area would be 10 meters in height. This area and this property has a special zoning that only permits 8 meters, and the applicant is proposing a height of 7.5 meters. That would be within the bylaw.
Okay, just so I'm clear, I think Mr. Dennison mentioned it was approximately 1,000 square feet on the bottom, 1,000 square feet on the top. I'm rounding that out, but about 2,000 square feet. I think I heard that correctly, Madam Chair. And on Lake Street, and I have driven that road, there are other residents there, 2-story homes. I think member Grace or Martin mentioned that.
If I may, through you, Chair, this area has a mix of single detached dwellings that are 1 story or 2 stories.
Going to a home that's twice the size, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, is parking going to be an issue? Perhaps it's a question of Mr. Dennison too. Can we still ask questions of him, or is that past that stage?
I think it's Julie, I don't know, are you cognizant of the zoning bylaw and the parking requirements for R1?
Yes. Their lot will be able to accommodate the parking to meet the bylaw.
And can you just state what that is?
I believe it's 1 parking space per residential unit, 2 spaces, sorry. So they can facilitate that in the driveway, 2 spaces.
Thank you.
Member Beckett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify, so the existing cottage, even if it's demolished, a new one could be built within the existing restriction. They wouldn't need to apply for non-conformity for that, right? Like they can already use their existing footprint.
Correct.
Right. So it's basically once it's approved, that piece of land, whatever you put there, you can have it to those dimensions. So maybe I've missed it in the report. What is the justification for then increasing the rear yard setback? Because is it just for the design of the house, or?
Are you asking that question of me or the applicant?
I guess of the applicant or the builder, like that's what I mean, I understand making it taller and having another story, but I'm not sure what the justification would be for increasing or decreasing the setback if it's just that that's the design of the house.
We can direct that question to Mr. Dennison.
Sure. Sorry. I think I'm unmuted now.
I can hear you.
Perfect. So we were trying to, because the rear yard of the building or of the lot the house at 242 is already really tight. We're actually improving, in my opinion, the front yard, trying to keep the house as far back as possible. It is an undersized lot. The owners are trying to build a future retirement home for themselves. So to fit everything on the 1 story, that you would want for your retirement home, laundry, bathroom, master bedroom, and then you throw in stairs. Adding stairs is another 50 square feet of space minimum to add to the footprint. So it just becomes very tight to fit all those things to meet the requirements. So that's the main reason for the ask on the increase. And then the second floor is there for family and guests, as their kids have kids, so on and so forth. So
Okay. Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
I know that Councillor Grace has another question. I have a couple here too. I'll ask a couple of mine ahead of you, Councillor Grace. It's been mentioned a couple of times that this is an undersized lot. What is the actual lot size? Julie, do you know that? Perhaps we'll have someone in the chambers who can.
If I may, I do have it here. Just one moment. So the lot size, I believe here.
yeah, I can answer that if you want.
224 square meters, I believe. Steve, if you can answer that.
Yeah, in feet, it's 44 feet wide and it's 55 feet deep. I work in feet better too, so.
Thank you. For you, Ms. Steeper, I believe you, or perhaps it was Mr. Dennison, gave some dimensions that I think what I heard was the enhancement or the enlargement is the equivalent of about 10 square meters above what's actually there and it's described in the document as a modest increase or the same general footprint. What number would you have to get to for it to be described as something other than modest? I just, it seems not so modest to me when you look at the square footage of the building and you're adding that much to it. That what's the percentage of that? Is it 10% of the building that's being expanded? Is it 15%? I didn't do the math on that, but what would justify it being less than modest?
I mean, I guess that's dependent upon the planner. I mean, when I had a look at this, I looked at the scale in relation to existing buildings surrounding the property, and also in relation to how this was expanding. So I also looked at the footprint of the dwelling itself. But if I took the whole development, because the existing has a existing rear deck, and the proposed has a front porch being proposed. Really, when I looked at the size of everything on site, the difference on a whole, is actually 4.4 square meters is being expanded if you took in calculation of decks and the front porch.
Okay, so my read of our zoning bylaw would suggest that front porch could come out with nothing else being asked for, 1.5 meters. So the front yard setback that is being suggested to us as being an improvement, I would guess that the front porch is coming out 1.5 meters into that number that has been given to us as the front yard setback. Is that a fair assumption for me to make?
Yes, I believe that porch is approximately 1.4 meters. Yes.
Okay. And just a couple more, and then Councillor Grace, you're going to be on. With the backyard, we're being encouraged to think of this as an improvement. However, again, when you look at the rear yard setback, the way that our yard encroachment or yard ability, I guess, in the zoning bylaw, it is possible with no further application for a deck to be constructed on the back of the new build that pushes the deck right back out to within a meter of the back lot line, which is very much where that deck is right now. So to describe this as an improvement, I don't see that. Is that a fair assumption for me to make too?
Sorry, are you directing that question to me? I guess, I mean, my opinion is that this would be providing further amenity space in the rear yard.
But the reality is that there could, with no consideration by the Committee of Adjustment, the zoning bylaw will enable a deck to be constructed on the back of this house, which encroaches further into that rear yard, whatever the distance is, to within 1 meter of the back lot line. I did want to ask one more question, and I might have another one after Councillor Grace, but it's been mentioned about a fence that was constructed that is not on their property. I don't see anything in the planning application that addresses that fence. It suggests that, there are encroachments on public land. Can we not do something that corrects that if that in fact is something that has happened that shouldn't have happened? Because there is no reason for somebody to build a fence on other than their own property. And if it has been constructed in that way, can we not correct that during this process as well?
If I may, through you, Chair, the fence is actually, if you look at the survey, and I don't know if somebody could bring that survey up on the screen for a moment. There is small tiny X's identifying the fence, and those are located on the property boundaries. And so the fence is located not located on somebody's property. It's located on the property boundaries.
Sorry, the fence that a member of the public suggested was located on other than this property, that fence is actually on 243 Lake Street?
That is correct.
Okay, and we have a bona fide survey that shows that?
Yes, so I don't know if you can see the screen there. There is tiny small X's you can see on both sides of the property boundaries, and that's identifying where the posts of the fence are located, and they are on the property boundary.
Okay, it would appear, so this survey is recent then?
That's correct.
Thank you.
2024.
Okay. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something else that occurred to me that I don't know if I can get an answer to, but when I was reading the summary from the Gowing law firm that was shared with the committee by Candace Ham. This is from our town staff talking about various related court decisions. One of the court decisions outlined that new activities that expand beyond the pre-existing uses may not be protected under the non-conforming use. So I guess my question is, and I think I probably know the answer, but under our zoning bylaw, is the use of a property that previously was not used as an Airbnb or a rental property becoming a rental property? Is that something that we can consider when we're considering this planning application? Because the court decision says it is a relevant thing to be considered. But I don't know if they're talking about really different activities and uses, or if that would still be within the boundaries of residential uses.
If I may, through you, Chair, I can provide some clarity in regards to that. The section you were speaking to is in regards to when uses are different. In this case, the proposed use is residential, and that would be what the zone is. And so in this case, it wouldn't be different. I believe what you're looking at was like something where a property, and I'm providing a hypothetical scenario. If there was a residential building and then that lot became rezoned industrial because there was plans for industrial to be in that area, that residential use could continue even though it wasn't necessarily a permitted use in that industrial zone that it was now located in. It's not meant, for example, in regards to like rental or permanent residency, distinguishing that. In this case, it's residential, and that's how I've viewed the application.
Thank you for that, Councillor Grace. Is any other questions? Okay. I will now declare the public hearing to be closed, and the committee will now discuss the application. So now's a chance where you can voice your opinions and your comments, and I open the floor for those, should anybody wish to speak. Member Schmidt.
Yeah, my main concern is with the rear setback. When you look at the house behind is already close to the fence, so putting this even closer to that, I think there's definitely quite a serious loss of privacy with a two-story house. I don't know what the math was, but we're talking about perhaps 3 meters between the two houses or something like that. So I was just thinking that is too short a setback between houses, and it would definitely impact on the neighbor that's behind them.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too will start off with that issue of the rear setback. It's true that a contributing factor to the lack of available space between the two properties is surely a result of the past non-conforming builds in this neighborhood. That's a fact that happened. It's non-conforming, it's legal, and I don't think that it's fair to penalize the neighbors at on Macaulay. That's the way it is, I guess. This is a very small lot. And when you look at the proposed build, it is significantly larger, has significantly increased number of bedrooms and beds, which are outlined in the diagram presented of the second floor. So I do have concerns about the adequacy of parking, even if this is not used as a rental, which is permitted. You know, that I don't see how there's room on the site for parking, just given the reality of how many people drive cars and that kind of thing. I do want to talk about the issue of the court opinion summary, because ultimately I think we have a duty, or I have a duty as a committee member, to make a decision that is consistent with the court precedent. The court precedent so far, even including Canadian Supreme Court decisions, says that there is an absolute right to expand within the existing footprint for legal non-conforming properties. And as our planner has explained, the two tests that are to be used, there are two tests, not the usual four that we would be considering in a minor variance application. And those two tests are, is this an appropriate development for this property? And that it is not anticipated to result in any undue adverse impacts on the surrounding properties and neighborhood. So one of the things that the court decisions also say, though, is that regarding the undue adverse impacts, that those impacts must be demonstrated by objective evidence. So speculation that this may happen or that may happen. You know, I don't know what the court would say about that, but I would think that their bar for what is objective evidence would be more than speculation. I am not enthusiastic about this application because of the fact that I think it is inappropriate. The size of the total build is inappropriate. But when I look at the court decisions, I think that if my position right now, I want to hear from other people on the committee, but I think that if this committee turns down this application, it would probably not stand up to a court test, an appellate test. So, Madam Chair, that's all I'm saying now. I'm not quite sure yet. I'd like to hear from other members, please.
Thank you. Member Beckett?
I think my opinion is, and I agree with Councillor Grace to a certain extent. I would argue that it does have an adverse effect on the properties around it. I guess that might be a question for the courts later down the road. I think my opinion is the people that bought the property, the land, they have every right to build a new house and to change things. I feel that it could be done within the existing dimensions that have been given, that there's already been, non-conforming variances granted. And I feel that if you eliminated, for example, I'm not a property developer, but if you eliminated the front porch, you could build it and not have that setback at the back. So that's kind of where I am. I feel that there could be a compromise where they could still have their new property, but they could be within the existing guidelines and not need an additional minor variance exception.
Member Martin? And just sometimes we have to end at 6 o'clock. We don't today because there's no council meeting at 6:30. So, Michael?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think we're all agreed that we're really focusing on the second arm of the test of section 45 sub 2 of the Planning Act, and that is the application. It's not anticipated to result in any undue adverse impact on the surrounding properties and neighborhoods. So first of all, I just want to sort of summarize my position on what is not before us. If they were to build on the existing footprint, it's my respectful view that they can build a complete second floor. To go around that neighborhood, at least 50% have got second floors. A lot of them appear to be newer than the 70-year-old buildings which are currently there. The real issue to me comes down with the back, with the rear yard setback. The mere increase of the footprint of 2% does not strike me as devastating. What I have a real problem with is the setback from the property at 242 Macaulay, which is directly behind it, that have that very, very small amount of space in between, to me really strikes in the second part of the test undue adverse impact. As far as because the existing use of the property before, its footprint is incredibly close to the property line. And to have this build also add to that, in my respectful submission, does create a problem. And I have real trouble with that aspect of this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You need to turn your mic off.
Okay.
Mike, did you, Vice Deputy Mayor Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And my issue really is the impact on the Macaulay resident and the rear yard setback. So I agree with committee members on that. I'm really struggling with the height of that building in relation to the neighboring resident to the rear at the Macaulay College. And that's where my issue is. I don't have, the legal non-conforming standing up in court, surviving the test with planner recommendations to approve this. We're already, that's working against us if we decide to not approve this application, although we don't run scared of those types of things. We have been to court before, but I'm struggling with the rear yard setback. And if it wasn't as close to that residence, I'd probably be feeling a whole lot different about this application. So I also, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Okay, well, I will weigh in and anyone is welcome to ask to speak again. Councillor Grace brought up a review of one of the documents that were circulated to all of us, and I read that very carefully as well. And there's reference in there to uncovering activities carried out at the site related to intensification of pre-existing activities as opposed to a difference in kind. I'm struggling with the sense that we have to accept that the use being proposed is completely residential. It's been described as creating a retirement home. However, I also have a concern about the number of bedrooms and the potential for an Airbnb type or short-term rental type structure. And to me, that kind of thing is a difference in kind or a different use. However, we have no question that we can ask, which really gets at the intention and gives us something that we can fall back on later. Because there's not a place where it says, if you apply and you mislead or whatever, falsify. Like we don't have any of that with these kinds of applications. So I'm struggling too. So the intention of the landowner is hard to pin down, except, we have some drawings. And I'm concerned about the proximity to the neighbor to the rear too, but also to the other houses in that area. They're all, or structures in that area, they're all undersized lots pretty much. And so to describe something as being a modest increase, well, anything that's even modest there is kind of significant because everything is already close together. And I don't fault the neighbors to the behind because, their cottage has been there 50, 60, 70 years as well. And so, they purchased that cottage knowing where it was. The Kellys, the applicant here, they've purchased their property knowing, where it is and what's around it. And so I'm struggling with that in terms of the use of modest increase and that sort of thing. I did take a good look at the property with regard to some concerns about landscaping. And, it's described about how, yes, they can meet 30% open landscaped area. Well, you start to look at the lot and when you realize how small it is, and if you took away the public road allowance at the front, I'm really struggling to see, and it's hard to see there's a lot of trees in the area right now, and there's still some snow there too. But, if you took away the public land and you looked at the size of the building and the potential to put a deck on the back. Where's this open landscape space? And also, I appreciate the comment in the application about preserving as many trees as possible, but you just have to stand in front and realize that if the building, as the intention says, to improve things by, creating something at the front, the big tree on the right side of the front is gonna have to go. And there's a rather significant tree on the left side of the front that likely would be impacted as well. And I, like others, didn't walk on the property to take a good look, but the comment about the town requesting that the condition be that all encroachments be removed, does that include the hedges that are on public property? That would certainly, really take away from the neighborhood. So I think the encroachment part is really just the hardscaping that's there, the fence and the patio. But, if that public little swath of public land across the front was there, I'm like, where is the open space on this lot? So I'm really concerned that I don't begrudge anybody who wants to, use the existing footprint. That's okay with what we've done in the past and that sort of thing. But to describe any kind of increase as modest or the same general footprint when it's such a small lot, it's going to be very significant. So I'm of the opinion that I appreciate what Councillor Grace said, but I think, we need to, wherever possible, respect existing neighborhoods. And I understand how hard it is to codify or to quantify character, and the undue impact is even harder perhaps to prove. But I believe that, people have invested in our community by buying property, and whether or not, they've bought a piece of property in this area or anywhere else, they bought a property knowing what was in their neighborhood. And I feel strongly that we should respect that situation, as well as consider a new investor, a new property owner, who should have an awareness of what's possible and what's not possible, and should just expect that if they want to go beyond possible, there should be the chance to ask questions and to comment back. So I would welcome if anybody else wishes to speak. Okay, seeing no one right now. So let's see, I got a nice little script here. We will now consider a recommendation on the application. Now, the recommendation we received from staff is a recommendation to approve with a couple of conditions. What I have the ability to do is, if there's a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, which I will read in just a second, we can proceed with that. However, if there isn't a mover and a seconder, we can have a different motion, or we can a different recommendation coming from the committee, or we can offer some amendment to what the recommendation is. And if I didn't say that quite properly, one of these two people up here they're far enough away, they can't kick me under the table, but.
Madam Chair,
Where was that?
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
The option that I wanted to present to the committee as well is that if there is something that you would like the applicant or the staff to consider, you can also defer the application as well. So the decision sheet does note an option to support the staff recommendation or not support it, but there's also the option to defer that decision.
Thank you for reminding me of the third option. So the recommendation that's before us is the application for enlargement extension of a legal non-conforming structure is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions. Number one, that the approval applies only to the development as shown on Schedule A attached to informing part of this decision. Number two, that all encroachments within the Lake Street road allowance be removed to the satisfaction of the town. And number three, that an engineered grading and drainage plan be completed by the owner or their agent to the satisfaction of the town as part of the building permit process. And just before I look to see if there's a mover and a seconder, this looks at a two-story single detached dwelling with a minimum front yard setback of 5 meters, a minimum interior side yard setbacks of 1.2 meters, a minimum rear yard setback of 3 meters with a 2.7 meters setback to the rear step, and a maximum height of 8 meters and a maximum lot coverage of 47%. Is there a mover? Is there a mover and a seconder for this motion? Is there a mover? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain either a different motion or a request to defer with suggestions or reasons or questions. Anyone want to go first? Member Beckett?
I would propose a motion that we just change the minimum rear yard setback to 4.47 meters. Personally, I'm okay, I think, with everything else on there. Other than that, that would be the only change that I would make.
So the amendment that you would propose would be very specific to the rear yard
Just
setback,
the rear yard with all the conditions that are currently on this proposal.
including the 8-meter height.
Yes.
Okay, so would you move that?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion would be the same as what I've read already, with the change that the sentence or the comment would read: a minimum rear yard setback of 4.47 meters. And I don't think we would need to make an adjustment for the rear step, but so a minimum rear yard setback of 4.47 meters. Is there a seconder for that?
Just to clarify, Madam Chair, just remind me though, the planners, I'm just trying to get to it. Planners recommendation for the setback is?
For the minimum rear yard setback is proposed as 3 meters from the planner.
Correct.
And it currently is 4.47. What's there right now? So Member Beckett has moved that amendment to the motion. Is there a seconder for that? Okay, seconded by Member Martin. Any discussion? Councillor Gray?
There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would like to see something, I would like to see a condition included in terms of the restriction of the height to 7.5 meters. Because, and I know this is something I asked Julie earlier about, and I know that's just the way that the building code is. But when you have a sloped roof, when it says 7.5 meters, that's measured to the midpoint of the peak, I think, instead of to the actual top, the very top. And so in reality, that 7.5 meters will turn out to be an actual top height of 9.6 meters. So if we allow the 8 meters, that's going to be over the 10 meters in reality. So I would like to include a condition of 7.5 meters as the top height, if possible.
I think we could accept that as a possible amendment to the new motion. Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
That's acceptable to me, yeah.
Okay, we will accept that as a friendly amendment then. So it would be 7.5 meters. Everson?
Just more of a process thing, because if we're saying setback should be 4.97 meters, now we're talking about a very different house. Is this something dictate, or is it something we should defer to see if the applicant can accommodate that?
Sorry, go ahead. Okay, the question is, since the motion is looking at a different rear yard setback and the height should be accommodated with the drawings, but because the minimum rear yard setback is different, it would likely require a different drawing. So if I could get some advice from the planner sitting in the chambers.
Thank you through you, Chair. So as part of the committee's decision, we would need a reason as to why you would be making these recommendations. And so as it relates to height, the height within the special residential R1-1 zone is 8 meters. So if you were looking to limit the applicant below what is currently permitted in that area, there would need to be a rationale tied to the tests, as well as if you're looking to reduce the rear yard setback as well, we would need to understand the rationale for that request and how it relates to those tests.
Thank you. And it wouldn't be acceptable on the height situation to just reflect what the applicant has actually submitted?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. My understanding, and perhaps I'll let Julie jump in if I'm incorrect here, but the plan that the applicant has provided is conceptual to illustrate what the design of the house would look like or could potentially look like. There are still design considerations that the applicant's taking into consideration. And so we didn't necessarily want to limit them to the 7.5 meters that they've indicated, simply because if there are changes in the design, just having that 0.5 meter flexibility up to the maximum height in the bylaw would allow for that.
However, in the same way, the builder has put in 7.5 meters.
That is correct.
Thank you. Okay, well, if someone would like to offer up some language in terms of some justification for the rear yard setback request. Member Martin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is in reference to, just let me get my notes here, to the second arm of the Planning Act test that we're supposed to put our minds to, which is that the application is not anticipated to result in any undue adverse impacts on the surrounding properties and neighborhoods. Our rationale is in part is to extend past the existing non-conforming legal footprint would create a proximity to the rear property at 242 Macaulay Street, such that that would create an undue adverse impact on the surrounding property. We do have evidence before, which we have not made reference to here, but it is on the mind of the committee as it was submitted by way of email from Catherine Perry, that's CATHERINE, and Janice Monahan, who are the owners of that property, who have concern with that. So that is an evidentiary base upon which we could make our decision, and we have all read that in advance. So I would respectfully submit that that would be the predicate to tie it into the second arm of the test under section 45 sub 2 of the Planning Act.
Thank you for that. Just as a follow-up question, perhaps for the planner, because the existing non-conforming footprint is showing that it is located, that 4.47 meters is the existing rear yard setback. That would still be fine, given that it is already in place. So that foundation line or that setback exists. So it should be possible just to continue with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That would be correct.
Okay, are there any other comments? Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we need a justification also for the condition about the limit of the height, then I would echo what Member Martin is talking about in terms of the submissions of Ms. Perry and Ms. Monahan. Their concern with a large cottage looming over their small one-story cottage. And the reality of the building code or building, I guess it's the building code, which talks about the reality of how we measure the height, and that a building that is supposedly 7.5 meters in height limit in reality turns out to be 9.6 meters. So that if we allow up to 8 meters, then that would be even larger and would, according to the second test, be more likely to result in an even more undue adverse impact upon the adjacent neighbors who are so close to the property at 243 Lake Street.
Thank you for that, Councillor Grace. So I've jotted down that the justification could be, and I'm sure I'll get some feedback if I haven't captured it properly, but the justification could be that we're responding to information presented by the builder with 7.5 meters. And we're also maintaining the existing rear yard setback, given the surrounding neighborhoods also non-conforming legal status. And we see the existing rear yard setback is not anticipated to result in any undue adverse impacts on surrounding properties and neighborhood. Is there any other comments? Okay, I'm going to read the motion then. So the motion would read that the application for enlargement extension of a legal non-conforming structure is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. That the approval, I guess we can't make it that it applies only to the development as shown. I see somebody coming to the mic. Director Polly, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Didn't mean to approach in a way that would interrupt, but just an opportunity to maybe comment on this once you finish reading it in for consideration.
It's like a lawyer approaching the bench. It's like, whoa, maybe we need a legal opinion. The development as shown on Schedule A is not going to be okay anymore, is it? I'm looking for some advice, so I can't use that line.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Well, the decision sheet has a line that the approval applies only to the development as shown on Schedule A. That will not be applicable anymore.
That's correct.
Okay. So the application for enlargement extension of a legal non-conforming structure is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. That all encroachments within the Lake Street road allowance be removed to the satisfaction of the town. That an engineered grading and drainage plan be completed by the owner or their agent to the satisfaction of the town as part of the building permit process. That the minimum rear yard setback be maintained at 4.47 meters, and that a maximum height of 7.5 meters applies to the development, and the minimum interior side yard setbacks of 1.2 meters, maximum lot coverage of 47%. And we haven't adjusted the minimum front yard setback, so it would still be a minimum front yard setback of 5 meters. So that's the motion that would be before you. And the reasons for approving this would be that the application is desirable for appropriate development of the subject property, and the application is not anticipated to result in any due adverse impacts on the surrounding properties and neighborhood, as it maintains an existing rear yard setback that has been legal non-conforming, and 7.5 meters was presented by the builder as desirable. So that's the motion. Did you want to speak before I call the question?
Thank you, if I may, Chair. I see that the committee is working hard to find a decision that will advance the application. And we're normally, as staff, reluctant to recommend deferrals, but I think in this instance, we're establishing recommended setbacks through this decision, but we don't have any indication from the applicant or builder that this is a building that would ever get built. And so we would have, if approved, you would have a decision that doesn't have, a building project to go along with it, which is normally the normal process is we have a building and the building has to be accommodated by the committee's decision. So I think certainly appreciating the thought that's gone into the current motion, committee may wish to prefer to offer the applicant and staff an opportunity to reconsider the application, having heard the concerns about in particular, the rear yard setback. And maybe there's an opportunity for the applicant to revise the application and in a way that would reflect something that they would have an intention of building. So I just wanted to offer that third road for consideration.
Thank you. So what can happen is the motion can be withdrawn and a motion can be put forward to defer, if that's the will of the committee. Member Beckett?
I take your advice and I'm happy to withdraw the motion, but I think it would be good if council, if we could advise that, these, if they redo the drawing or redo it under these measurements that we've discussed, that it has a much better chance of passing.
And is the seconder okay with the withdrawal?
Yes, and I'll just state the obvious. I would really like our motion as we have proposed it to be reflected in the minutes, so we can refer back on the fruits of our discussion over the past hour and a half when we see this again in another 6 months or whatever. But I am consent.
Madam Chair, if that motion is,
It's withdrawn.
I'll move that we defer.
Okay, I have a motion to defer this application. That's moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt, seconded by Councillor Grace. Is there any discussion about the deferral? I take into account what Member Myatt just said, or Member Martin just said, sorry. So is there any discussion about a deferral? All those in favor of a deferral? That's carried. Well, the other item on the agenda tonight is the final draft sign bylaw. So on February the 20th, 2024, staff brought a report to the Committee of Adjustment outlining the proposed method for drafting a new sign bylaw. Staff committed to bringing the draft bylaw back to the committee for discussion before it is advanced to council for approval. So I have a recommendation that the committee receive the final draft sign bylaw for information. Can I have a mover and a second for that? Moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt, seconded by Member Beckett. So we can have a discussion now. Comments on the draft sign bylaw. Member Martin.
I thank you very much, Madam Chair. When we had this up before, there was a small discussion about the prohibitions against profanity, and I'm really happy to see that they are keeping that in another section 4.0 prohibited signs sub E. Signs displaying profanity, nudity, hate messages, or other similarly offensive content is not allowed, and I really I'm glad that they've elected to keep that in because I think it's important to keep up the character of our community.
Thank you. Any other comments about the sign bylaw? Member Schmidt, sorry.
Just questions if that's, okay, good. So, to be honest with you, this is the first time I've looked at this sign bylaw, and I was actually surprised at how many rules and regulation there are in signage. Has this bylaw been compared to similar municipalities' bylaws? And like, I think what I'm a little concerned about is, and I've seen this happen before, where you have a company come in to, or a restaurant or franchisee coming into town, and this is their standards that they have for signage, and it doesn't conform with ours. So that makes it a little bit more cumbersome for them to do it. And I know that a lot of times it's come before the Committee of Adjustment, and we've accepted that changes. So it'd be nice to have some kind of a common standard on that. Has other municipalities' bylaws been looked at in this?
Yes, and thanks for the question. This bylaw was based on our previous bylaw. We brought a lot of the clauses over, so we've been using a lot of these clauses before. To your point, the major change was that we added freestanding signs, which are larger highway commercial signs that would come into compliance with what was the standard usually for a highway commercial sign.
Okay, can I ask another question? Because this is fairly new for me.
Yeah, just remember to turn your microphone off when you finish.
Oh, yeah,
so that
will do. Sorry about that.
If anybody's listening online, they can hear better when Josh speaks.
Thank you. Do we have, like a lot of these, when you get into a lot of bylaws, I'm concerned, do we have the ability to enforce this? Given, I think we've got limited bylaw officers, and we got a lot of issues that come up, particularly in the summer, that I've, particularly with dogs and beaches and things like that. Is that realistic that we can expect the bylaw officer to also deal with the signs?
Thanks for the question again. The current bylaw officer does deal with signs. We're adding a little bit more capacity in the summer with some student help, but currently we act on complaints and we do deal with signs. So the current bylaw officer does that.
Thank you. One more question. One thing I do have a concern with there's an event or an election that there's a proliferation of signage, like often one after the other. Now I know, and I don't know why, election signage is not part of this. Is there some other document that is? And I guess the other thing is more of, I find, having so many signs in a certain place is actually a distraction. Is there something that could be put in to limit the number of signs in a very specific property or area?
Yes, there are a number of limiting factors on signs. We do not include the election signs in ours. I think it's under another election area, so we do not include that in our sign bylaw.
Sorry, just to go on. So there's another bylaw on election signs? Oh, it's a provincial regulation, or?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So there is a separate bylaw that is solely on election signs. So it's not covered under this one. So what you have stated about with regards to a number of signs in a specific area, I'll take a look at the sign bylaw in advance of the 2026 municipal election with regards to that. And if appropriate, if I have if there's some recommendations to improve that bylaw, then certainly that's going to come forward. So.
To Member Schmidt's comment, I'm grateful to see language in here about third-party signs, because some of the signs you're talking about, a lot in one spot, they're third-party signs because they don't relate to a business that's right there. So there is language in here which effectively doesn't let them happen. So I like that. So are there any other comments? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Josh, for the report. I too am glad to see the preservation of the profanity clause. The 7.5 freestanding signs, I don't like to see the increase there. I think that, to me, even if it's just confined to highway commercial, and even if this is, not in line with surrounding municipalities. I mean, we talk a lot about preserving the small town character and the charm of our area and high commercial signs. I think the existing signs that we have are high enough. And I personally don't see any need to change our current process of asking people who want to increase it to come and justify why they think that's necessary. Thanks.
Yes, I can speak to that a little bit. The justification for that, I tried to demonstrate in the attached photos. It's kind of a bit basic, but I put a stick on beside the sign to show what is allowed and what we have now. So we do have many signs that exceed what the 8 feet that was proposed. We're trying to increase that to allow what's the general character of what's out there now. So
important to note, though, that most of those signs, I think there might be one that you sent us a photograph of that perhaps didn't go through a process, the Plex sign, but the rest of those signs did come through Committee of Adjustment over a long period of time to have, and they had to justify why they wanted the height. So any other comments? I would agree with Councillor Grace that I think the freestanding signs that are in the highway commercial zone, currently the bylaw enables, the sign bylaw enables a sign of 2.5 meters, has the height, and then if they want higher than that, they can apply for a variance. Jumping from 2.5 to 6, it's more than doubling it. I don't think that I don't want to see that happen. So that would be something that I will be prepared to speak against when it hits the council floor. And I think that when some of the requests came in the past, there was a different kind of thing about signs, and it was a different time. There wasn't GPS. You didn't have your phone that gave you directions. And I think there was a sense that people needed that to get them identified. And so people could find them. I'm not too sure that all of that is relevant anymore. So you know, as I'm just, my own personal opinion is that I don't think we need to enable just as a matter of right, higher signs along the highway. Certainly if somebody wants to go and ask for it, it could be considered, but I don't think they should just be able to do it. But any other comments? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I support the 6 meter, but I'll voice my opinion at council in that regard as well. I can recall, and Deputy Mayor, you and I differ on this one. I know when these signs have come to council in the past, or the committee in the past, the 2.5 meter, there will be requests for 4, 5, and 6 meter. It's inevitable. It's just going to happen. Been there. In the 10 years we've been sitting around this table, and I can't recall turning one down to get to the 5, 6. I see why you were doing it. The requests are coming. They're not going to stop. So we can deal with them at the Committee of Adjustment, but to limit our local business to 2.5 meter, I think is not the right thing to do. And I'll voice my opinion when that comes to council. However, we'll differ on that one.
I wanted to just bring up to the flashing light idea. I'm glad you've captured some of it in the draft. The language, though, still reads as though the flashing lights have to resemble an emergency light or lights. I think, you know, just flashing lights can flash without looking like a fire truck light or the flashing light that perhaps is on the roof or sides of a police vehicle or an ambulance. So, and I think the concern from the public is that there are a number of people that have adverse reaction to flashing lights. So whatever we can do. So I appreciate that it's here, but it seems to specifically liken it to something that replicates an emergency light or lights. And I don't know if that's gonna help members of our community that suffer from something that is impacted by flashing lights. I wanted to ask though, just while we have you here, when the new bylaw, because the assumption is there will be a revised bylaw at some point, how do we deal with existing signs? So there's language in here, 3.2 says a sign with a valid permit and or the valid permit, or they had a valid variance, or they match the bylaw inclusions, they're fine. Signs that don't have that, how do they get addressed?
That would be a difficult one, and depending on the age. The newer signs, we would easily be able to find a permit. If it gets grandfathered in, that's a sign that's long ago, it's gonna be very hard to find a permit for that. So older signs are grandfathered in.
Unless there's language in here that also talks about if a business changes or a business closes or the change of ownership. It's just, there are some signs that, they are old signs and they no longer have any relevance because the business doesn't exist or they haven't been maintained, that sort of thing. So there are ways to address that, even if you can't find a permit.
That is correct. There is a maintenance section on that, so we could go through that.
Thank you. And just one more here. A-frame signs are here, and I think Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt had asked a couple questions about A-frame signs. So A-frame or A-board signs, they're considered accessory signs, not portable signs.
That is correct.
Okay, so to look for that information there.
And
Okay.
to that point, we did clean up the wording as requested, so I think it reads a lot better.
Okay, is there anything else? Well, the motion that we have before us is to receive the draft sign bylaw for information. Did I get a mover and a seconder on that? Okay, can I have a mover and a second? Moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt, seconded by Member Martin. Any other discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, then we have the next meeting of the Committee of Adjustment is scheduled for Tuesday, not a Monday, Tuesday, April the 22nd at 5 o'clock. That's because of the Easter holiday weekend. And of course, it's always dependent upon if we have applications. Are you aware of any? We do? Okay, so certainly we can plan on a meeting on Tuesday, April the 22nd. And I will entertain a motion that this Committee of Adjustment meeting of March the 17th, 2025 hereby adjourns at 6:44 p.m. Moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt, seconded by Member Schmidt. All those in favor? There you go, Mike. Got her done by 6:45. Thank you very much. And